What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our Week 12 college football preview and picks. As always, I have Ty joining me here. But before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below to be entered into our giveaway. And we'll start with last week's results. And Ty, yet again, for I think the third time this year, undefeated record and a pretty solid one as well. And your only close call was that Arizona-Colorado game that you and I picked differently. But besides that game, which game stood out to you the most in week 11?
I would say probably the Georgia game. I think right now a lot of people were thinking maybe Michigan was the best team in the country, but now I think the general consensus has shifted to Georgia, not just because they beat a top 10 team, but they blew out Ole Miss at home. So I think that was a really impressive win, and I think it was more of a statement for Georgia, like kind of saying, we've won this thing twice in a row. You got to go through us.
Yeah, I agree on that. I mean, obviously Georgia has been Georgia, and I just thought it was time for them to lose that streak. But if you want to talk about some streaks that are probably going to come to an end here, I think Florida State is one of those teams that they're not going to be undefeated. I think when it's all said and done, come college football playoff time, whether it's before then or in the ACC championship, I think they're going to lose one game. This team just somehow coasts to victories, and we saw it yet again against Miami. 27-20. It wasn't a good game to really watch as a Seminole fan because they were just hanging around the whole time. But a win is a win at this point in the season, and they're still in the top four. And we'll go to the team that I think possibly has the best chance to beat Florida State in Louisville. In this game, money line straight up. And I think it's kind of hard to turn away from this one if you like to bet on the Cardinals. I think they have all the intangibles this year to possibly earn themselves a shot at a college football playoff when it's all said and done if they can win out. And they got to start here with a big road win. And Miami, yes, a few weeks ago they benched Tyler Van Dyke for their quarterback that got hurt last week, and now Van Dyke's back in. And if he can limit his turnovers, then this Miami team, the ceiling is a top ACC team, which they played at the beginning of the year. But I don't think that team comes out, and I think the Cardinals win.
Yeah, I think this will be a close game into the fourth quarter, but Louisville, I don't think anyone would disagree with this. They're better coached than Miami, and there's a lot of examples of that so far this year. So I think coaching is going to be a huge difference here. And obviously, Louisville has a lot to play for with that one loss still. So still in the mix, honestly, for a potential backdoor playoff berth. In Miami, I know they kept it close with Florida State, but they just could not throw the ball at all in the second half. And I don't see much of that changing this week.
And then our Wolverines head to Maryland, face the Terps, and Michigan should obviously coast to a victory here. And I'm kind of looking at that spread, thinking it's a little too low because we talk about it every year. For the last 2 years, we've been doing this. Maryland in September is great. October they start falling apart, and when November hits, they are just flat out dead on the field. And I think it's going to be the same situation here. Michigan just steamrolls through Maryland.
Yeah, if anything, maybe Michigan looks ahead a little bit. It is a trap game. I mean, the ultimate trap game. They're coming off a huge statement win, and next week they have a kind of big game. So this could be a bit of a trap. But like you said, Maryland has not been playing very well lately. Penn State just went in there 2 weeks ago and absolutely steamrolled them by I think 36. So I think Michigan should cover here on the road and should set themselves up at 11-0.
And then a great game to watch for in the American Conference, SMU, Memphis. And I'm going with the Mustangs on the road. They've been a very sneaky team this year, heading in at 8-2, both these teams at 8-2. But something about these Mustangs have me feeling that they're going to go to the American Championship and possibly play Tulane if they can make it. And I think that's what's going to happen here as SMU gets that big road win.
Yeah, I'm going with Memphis at home here, a home dog in this game. But Memphis hasn't been to the American Championship in a couple of years. It seemed like they went every year for a while, and I think this is the year they go back.
And then at 2:30, a big game in the Pac-12 where whoever loses this game is going to be eliminated from potentially the Pac-12 championship. But realistically, these teams are kind of already out of it if Washington doesn't lose this week. And Arizona has been a great story this year. And 7-3, I don't think they're still getting enough credit for what they've done. All three of their losses have been by single possession. two of those to top 10 teams. And Arizona -1 against the Utah team that's kind of reeling still from a blowout loss and not really looking the same that they were the first half of the season. I think it's kind of a no-brainer here, Arizona at home.
Yeah, I think Arizona is just on a mission right now. They have been red hot. I mean, out of nowhere too. I think they started 1-3, maybe 2-3, but they have just been absolutely on fire since then. And I think playing at home this week, they're going to be able to just barely get by Utah. I know Utah played Washington close last week, but I still think Arizona is just playing as well as anyone in the Pac-12, and I think they'll get another win.
Then at 3:30, you have another Pac-12 matchup, the good old rivalry of California, UCLA, USC. There's probably going to be no defense played in this one. And if that's the case, well, you got to go with the team with the better quarterback. And Caleb Williams is that guy. They get to 8-4. And I mean, it's a disappointing season as a team. But for Caleb Williams, obviously continuing his draft stock of being the number one pick is still potentially up there. It's just a matter of which team gets the number one pick. But Caleb Williams should dominate this Bruin defense.
Yeah, I agree. Caleb Williams still had two really good games against Washington and Oregon. You can't really blame him too much for those losses. And I think this week he's due for a huge game. And UCLA freshman quarterback on the road, I just don't see him keeping up in a shootout this week. So I think USC finally gets back on track.
In a big game in the SEC. And if Tennessee were to win last week, it would be just as big for the standings as well. But unfortunately, they lost to Mizzou, and they're reeling. Joe Milton and that team just, I don't know what volunteer team we're going to get. And the spread at -10 shows that this volunteer team is still a good team. Georgia, it looked like last week everything clicked, and it's the Bulldog team that we've been looking for before that game. And the rest of the 9 games of the year before that, we're still wondering, when is Georgia going to be that team to beat? And last week proved it to me that they're back, and it's kind of hard to bet against the Dogs anymore.
Yeah, I agree. This might be their toughest test this year, being that it's on the road. But the way they played last week, I don't see any way you could pick against them right now. That offense just looks like a well-oiled machine, weapons everywhere. And now with Bowers and McConkey on the field at the same time, I think Georgia's going to have a big day on offense.
In an ACC game that will matter, North Carolina still needs to win to possibly have a chance in the championship, but they go against Clemson, and Clemson's favored by 7 in this one at home. And I'm still going with the Road Dogs here in North Carolina. I think North Carolina's magical season continues. They get to 9 wins, possibly 10, and maybe even squeak into a New Year's Six bowl game. But if they were to lose a game before then, I think it's going to be this one. I don't think they'll lose next week, but I could see them losing to Clemson here. But something about this pick just tells me I got to go with North Carolina.
Yeah, I might have went that way as well, but Clemson showed in their game against Notre Dame that this team has not quit on Dabo this year. So I think they're going to still have a lot to play for this week. Obviously, out of the ACC race, out of the New Year's Six race, none of that's on the table, but still a chance to finish the season really strong. And I think they'll be able to continue that in this game. I think playing on the road for North Carolina here is going to be really tough, and that defense has just really showed nothing the last few weeks that makes me think they're going to win this game.
And in a game in the Mountain West that can decide who goes to the championship, Air Force, UNLV, and I'm going with Air Force. Yes, they are on a slump right now. They've lost 2 in a row, but they got to rebound quickly here, and I think they do. And if Air Force is going to win this game, it's going to be a low-scoring affair. So give me that under as well. This team was undefeated at one point and ranked, but like I said, they've lost it, and I think this is the win that gets them back on track.
I think UNLV is going to storm into Colorado this week and get the big road win. Air Force obviously started out great this year, but they haven't looked the same since they were blown out by their rival Army. And I think that's going to continue here. I know they're favored, but the Rebels have been very underrated. They only have 2 losses, and one of them is at Michigan. So honestly, this team has been a really solid group of 5 team. I think they'll prove that again this week.
Then moving over to the Big 12, Kansas State, Kansas. Both of these teams outside looking in on a Big 12 championship appearance, and Kansas State obviously has a better chance to do so. And they're going to state that case yet again going into the last week of the season. K-State, on the road here. I know it's still a tough game, rivalry game and whatnot, but I just think they have the more complete team at the moment where Kansas is kind of reeling. And I know they pulled off an upset a few weeks ago, but then last week showed me that, well, this team just kind of lost it. And Kansas State has been the more consistent team throughout the year, so I got to go with the Wildcats.
Yeah, Kansas has all kinds of injuries at quarterback right now, so I just don't see them keeping up in this game. Kansas State's been looking really good as of late. They started out slow this year, but really the last 2 months, all they have is that game against Texas where they're on the road and almost came back and got that win. So they've been really underrated the last 6 weeks or so, and I think that'll continue here with a big rivalry win.
And then moving to the SEC, you have Florida and Missouri. And this is another spread that I think I would like heading into the weekend. 11.5. Missouri, after last week's dominant performance at home against Tennessee. Well, why are they favored so little against Florida, who's clearly worse than Tennessee? And maybe Vegas is trying to tell me something here, but for money line pick, you got to go straight up with Mizzou. They're on fire right now. Even that loss at Georgia wasn't an ugly loss. It was a competitive loss, and right now I think it was Georgia's biggest competition, if we're going to be honest.
Yeah, I would agree. And Missouri looked great last week, absolutely blew the doors off Tennessee. I think they ride that momentum this week. Florida, obviously, next week they get Florida State. I think they have to win one of these last two games or Billy Napier's gone. I know it's only year two, but you can't go 5-7 at Florida in your second year and expect to keep your job. So we'll see if he's lost the locker room or not. But unfortunately, this week, even if everyone's all in, I don't see him winning at Missouri.
Then on ABC, probably the biggest game of the week, Washington, Oregon State, and Washington is still trying to keep their undefeated season alive and the Pac-12 championship hopes alive as well. Then Oregon State, a team that was, kind of struggling to find themselves early in the year with DJ Ugalele coming in as a transfer, but now he has really found it, and this team is a very good team, and they're a team that prides themselves on defense and running the ball. But this high flying Washington team, I just think a touchdown late is going to seal it, and they win by either double digits or at least two possessions. And Michael Penix Jr. yet again states his case for a Heisman.
Yeah, I could see this being the game where Washington finally gets tripped up. But I just think Michael Penix is going to make one too many plays late in this game, and Washington's going to be able to squeak this one out. I thought USC would be the team to knock them off. They couldn't do it at home. Yeah, in another tough road environment this week that I think Washington's going to be able to just be able to escape out of. I know they've been kind of walking a tightrope lately. They've had a close game last week, close game with Arizona State, Stanford, but I still think they're going to stay undefeated going in the Pac-12 championship.
And then a game where I think too many people aren't looking at enough is the Texas Iowa State game. And this Iowa State team at home has been good this year. And now Texas comes into town. Quinn Ewers in his second game back after being injured, so he should be a little better in this one. And I like Texas here on the road, but the spread 7.5, I might have to take for Iowa State just because Texas, they haven't had really huge convincing conference wins in the last few weeks here. And, Jonathan Brooks, he's out actually in this one, their leading rusher. So that's something to monitor as well. And if they can't figure out to run the ball, then Iowa State might come away with an upset, but I don't think that's going to happen as I got to go with the Longhorns here.
Yeah, this just feels like another one where Texas is going to squeak it out. Iowa State is an underrated place to play. I think it's going to be a really tough environment in a night game there. I just don't think they have quite enough to keep up. I know Brooks is out, but Quinn Ewers is back, like you said, and I think that's going to be all Texas needs. It might be ugly like it has the last few weeks for them, but I still think they get out of Ames with a win.
And that's going to be it for our video this week. Make sure you guys check back next week to see how we did in our picks and for the last week of the regular season. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.